Hi, and good evening. This is Tony and Andrea from Digital CoLab. Erin is not with us tonight. She is partying it up in San Antonio, so we are stuck at home filling in for her, but that's okay. Hopefully she'll share pictures with us next week. This week we are actually talking about one of my favorite topics, which is sponsored posts or sponsored campaigns or working with brands. They all sort of fit in together, and obviously this is not something that we can cover in its entirety in 30 minutes. So what we want to do tonight is just give you an overview, answer questions that you might have on sponsored campaigns, and as well as talk a little bit about strategy and negotiation of how you can best leverage your brand and your position on the web to either get more campaigns or to get a higher price for the campaigns that you do. So anyway, I'm in a unique position right now where I work pretty closely with a company that does a lot of sponsored campaigns. So I still do them for my website, but I found myself on the other end as well, actually creating campaigns, recruiting bloggers, managing campaigns, and it's been very eye-opening to see, I felt like I knew a lot as a blogger on how sponsored campaigns worked, but it's very interesting to see the other side, working directly with the brands, working with the sales team, and really seeing how both sides can work together to really create some successful content and successful branding for a brand, as well as, putting money in bloggers' pockets and, helping them grow their business as well. So I think we'll first start out with just talking about, and Andrea, you might want to chime in on this first, since it's only you, what are the benefits? I know you've stopped doing a lot of sponsored campaigns, so why did you stop, and then what benefits did you see for your brand in doing it, and what drawbacks did you see that maybe caused you to stop?
Yeah, so I basically stopped doing sponsored campaigns just because of time. And I'm getting a chat saying I'm not sure if they can see both of us on the screen now. I'm not sure if there's some technical difficulties, but hopefully they can hear us. So it really had to do with the fact with time. And I was working on other projects, and I saw that some of the sponsored campaigns that were coming in they weren't for things that I was truly passionate about. Let me see here. Jen is telling me that she can't see me. I'm not sure if she can hear me. Hold on a second. Sorry.
Okay.
She always sends me these messages and I can't. Okay, she can hear me, so that's all I really care about right now.
I'll make some hand signals.
Okay, make sure you have my arrow over the face. So
We'll find a
anyway,
picture of you. Hold on. Keep talking.
okay. So I just realized that I wanted to work on other projects, and some of the campaigns that were coming in were not things that I was like totally passionate about, and I stopped doing that a lot of the sponsored posts. But what I did continue to do were Twitter parties. So I knew that I could get a decent rate for the Twitter parties because I have a large number of Twitter followers, and doing a Twitter party, I actually like to do it from cradle to grave, and that I like to work on the entire concept with the company, work on all of the questions, work on the timing. I did all of that stuff, so I could actually warrant a little bit of a higher payout because of that. So because I realized that that was kind of like where I wanted to focus a lot more of my attention versus doing a sponsored post, that's what I did really over the past 2 years instead.
And did you find that with the Twitter parties, because I feel like those can be pretty lucrative for, obviously there's a lot of content creation and strategy that goes into if you're basically taking the Twitter party from idea to execution, but do you feel like it's a better return on investment for your time? Because I know they tend to pay a little bit more than some of the sponsored campaigns when you're actually in charge of the Twitter party as opposed to just joining in.
Yeah, I thought that it was a better use of my time, and then also I was able to, easily package stuff for the brand to say, okay, I'll run this Twitter party for you, I'll help you formulate the questions. Not all brands actually wanted that, so if they didn't want that, then I was able to reduce the rate a little bit, but I would still post it on my other social channels and on my blog to promote the Twitter parties. So I just think that that was really what worked the best for me. Now, I may go back to doing some sponsored content. I'm still a member of IZEA. I'm a member of, the savings.com network, but those are the only two networks that I actually am active in, just because some of the other ones they just aren't really exciting for me. So.
Okay, that's actually a good segue. So let's talk about basically the different avenues for sponsored campaigns. I would say that you have working directly with a brand. So the brand itself, someone directly from Kraft is contacting you, or any brand, Wilson basketballs, whatever. And then you have working with the agency. So someone like Edelman or CRISPR, or they're contacting you and running the campaign. And then there would be basically our big networks of sponsored content distributors. So Collective Bias, IZEA, Tap Influence, oh my gosh, Clever Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that would be, I don't even, well, there's several, but those are probably the big ones. Savings.com has one. And then on top of that, there's also some smaller, so say, I've seen where bloggers actually organize these themselves. So say you have a blogger who's approached by Pepperidge Farm, they want to do some sort of holiday campaign, and they want that blogger to recruit 5 more bloggers. So it's not necessarily an agency or a blogger that does this all the time, but basically these one-off campaigns where, because you know somebody and this person's working on a campaign and the company wants a bigger reach, participate that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, can you think of any other ways to get the campaigns?
I don't. I think you've hit pretty much all of them. I mean, this is your forte. This is the area that you pretty much have mastered from, the blogger side and now the brand side. So I think you covered a lot of them.
Okay, and so let's real quick just go over like the pros and cons of both of them. I would say if we started with, let's start with working with a company like Collective Bias, Tap Influence, IZEA. The pros are that you don't have to go out and find campaigns. Usually they have a job board or postings of campaigns that are available, and you can click and apply. So you've taken out a couple steps of, actually acquiring the campaign. I feel like that would be one of the pros to go with them. The other one is these people are professionals. This is their business, so they're pretty good about like getting you all the information you need, all the requirements, all the images, any product. It's pretty seamless working with some of the sponsored content companies. But on the con side, I would say that you probably don't make as much because they have to meet their margins and take off the top to run the company. So, and those costs are bigger for those types of companies as opposed to, I think, an agency. So I think the payouts tend to be a little bit lower.
Well, one of the things I've also found too, since you mentioned that, is I found that they want a lot more from you.
Yeah.
I mean, asking me to do these 20 steps, and you want all of my stats afterwards, and you want XYZ too. And it's like, you're an agency. You should have access to all of those different sites that can, curate that for you, and you're wanting that from the blogger. I agree that you should send them like a post follow-up campaign. I'm totally in that camp because I think that's just professional. But when they want all of these different things and then they want to pay you such a low rate, it's like, that's why, I guess the thing is, that's why they're probably not getting the quality that they could, because they're asking for so much for not paying a lot.
Right, and I think that, and I know some of them have, it's a little more integrated into the dashboard as far as submitting your information. So I think it varies depending on what company. So I think, the payouts can be lower. There are a lot of requirements. Sometimes there's less flexibility. So when you're working with, sort of a go-between, you can't always talk directly to the brand and say, this isn't the best fit if I do it this way, but I could probably work it this way, and it's actually a great fit. Sometimes they don't have that flexibility because they're operating on an IO that's pretty standard. So I think that's probably another con. And then, sometimes negotiation, but sometimes they actually will negotiate with you. So I say always ask for, if you don't think you think the rate is too low, always ask for more. I don't care who you're working with. They might say no, but I would say if you don't ask, you'll never have the opportunity to get more. But I think if you're new to blogging and this is an area that you want to work on for revenue, definitely get involved with some of these companies because it gets your foot in the door. There's usually a network of bloggers. You can see what other people do. You can sort of tell who's doing it better than others, and so it's a great way to learn. And I think most of us probably cut our teeth in networks like this, and sort of got the feel of what was expected by working with some of these companies. So, I think there's definitely some good points about being with a company that does it. And I remember the other avenue of sponsored campaigns is working with your ad network, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So I think the next avenue I would say is working with an agency. And this is probably what I've done the most of is working with a company's marketing or PR agency. It's probably my favorite too. They tend to pay pretty well, and they tend to have a lot of flexibility in the posts. The negative I would say is that they usually want all your content pretty far ahead of time. So if you're one of these like last minute, I get a sponsored campaign and the post is due up, on May 1st, you're writing it on April 30th at 11:59 p.m. And most of the time if you're working with an agency, they want that content 2 to 3 weeks in advance because they actually are giving it to the brand. The brand is making edits. They're going to ask you to make some changes. And they tend to be pretty stringent about, brand messaging. So these words need to be capitalized. This word needs a trademark signal, symbol, things like that. They don't want you to mention certain words. So, certain food brands don't want you to use the word healthy because it brings up a different meaning than what they want. And so, or they don't want you to use like a nutrition word because they don't want to deal with people who are saying, well, this doesn't really fit with your brand. So I think when you work with an agency, you run into a lot more of that sort of thing with really wanting specific wording with post and brand messaging. But I think you also make a lot more. So sometimes it's one of those things where you have to decide whether it's worth it or not to meet those requirements.
Yeah, and then sometimes the agencies, do they ever want you to put that same content on the brand site themselves for different campaigns?
Yep, I think that's actually a pro, I think. And I also think too with the agency is if you do a good job with an agency sponsored campaign, they tend to go back to the same bloggers all the time. And so I think if you can build up a good relationship with a certain brand in the division of their agency, you can really be working with that brand long term and making some significant income from it, especially from like the CPG companies, because I know the food brands tend to pay a little bit more as well. So if you're doing recipe creation and things like that, if your recipes are great, if your photos are great, it can be a huge revenue driver for your site. I think the next thing, and this is just really quick, is if you work with a group of bloggers, and I think the biggest thing is if you're working with a group of bloggers that they don't do sponsored campaigns as a business, this is they're doing one-offs for a company, make sure that everything is in writing. Make sure that it's really delineated who does the work, because basically you have a partnership there, and so you don't want to be the one. If everyone's agreeing to do a Twitter party or everyone's agreeing to create a group Pinterest board, make sure it's really delineated in writing how many pins each blogger is expected to do, what the expectation is for each person, because I think most of the time these things go sour when there's not clearly written expectations. It's sort of this verbal, oh, we chatted about it on Facebook and we sort of all agreed, and then you come to find out that people didn't really agree or they weren't really paying attention to the chat and there wasn't anything signed or in writing that prohibits things from not working out.
Very good point.
Now, as far as I guess we could talk, the other thing is going with your ad network. I think most ad networks now have jumped into the sponsored campaign business. I know people with Federated Media. Federated does a lot of campaigns. Burst does them. Andrew, have you done any campaigns with Burst?
No, I haven't. I don't know if I have to be on their special list or something, but they're the ones that I actually would like to do some campaigns with too.
Yeah. I've done some with Burst. I think I've done some with Totally Her as well. I think these are another one of those higher payout type campaigns. And the nice thing about these campaigns, I think, is that they already have all the information on your site, so a lot of that reporting and tracking is already done for you. But
Right.
they also tend to want that information in advance as well. They want to see the post a couple weeks in advance to make edits and make sure it aligns with the brand messaging. Now, let's talk about negotiating, because I know that that's a big, yeah, we'll do that one first. We'll talk about negotiating. I know that's a big sticking point, and I was actually at an event a couple weeks ago, and they threw out this scenario where a couple blog it was a talk, and they said, hey, we're going to throw out this potential campaign, and they made up this campaign, and they said, now what would you charge for this campaign? And it was interesting because people had to get up to the microphone and give their information of what they would charge, which I think is pretty hard to do, because that's your income. It's not something that necessarily everyone wants to divulge and share in front of a group of 100 other bloggers. But it was interesting to me that the bloggers that got up there, they all gave pretty high numbers, you know, $500, $1,000 for one post, 2 social media mentions, you know, pretty standard type thing. And I thought, you know, that's really high for a post that it doesn't involve like recipe creation, or, you know, you're not refinishing a piece of furniture, you're not, you know, you're not doing a big DIY project. It's just, you know, writing content. And that was my opinion. But I know other people, and I know we've seen in our Digi room that some people said, you know, that's not too high. And so how do you find that sort of happy medium of what's a fair price?
You know, my personal opinion when I'm pricing stuff is that this is my set hourly rate to do something, and I mean, I'll negotiate with a brand if I know that there's other campaigns I can work on, or if I know that, you know, I can give them a package deal, but at the end of the day, my hourly rate is my hourly rate, and that's not changing. And if I know that, a good post, to do a good quality post, is going to take me anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, and maybe I'm slow, but I like to make sure I have every, you know, every I dotted, every T crossed, and I'm getting all of their messaging in there in a way that's very organic and authentic to my readership, then I'm charging them based on what my hourly rate it would be. And of course, I might give them, you know, a discount because it would take me X to do it. There's 4 hours there. They'll get a discount from that, and then other social mentions and things. But I'm not going to negotiate that much from it if they come and say, we want you to do this and we're paying you $200 to do it. I would go back and say, no, this is my rate, and, you know, I'd love to talk to you and see if we can kind of make this work. If not, I totally respect the fact that you have to go to somebody else, because I know you have a limited budget too. So I know not everybody would agree with that approach, but that's just kind of where I am right now with, you know, the income that I want to generate off of sponsored content like that. And I know for a fact that I can go get that same hourly rate somewhere else if I chose to work on something else. So why would I sell myself short?
And what do you think about, so we talk about hourly rate, because that's basically how I do it as well. But then how do you factor in influence? Because at the end of the day, it probably takes me the same amount of time as it takes the Pioneer Woman to create a sponsored post, right? But clearly she has ridiculous amount of influence compared to me and compared to everybody that we know. So, you know, because Andrea, you have a ton of Twitter followers. So if you're working on a campaign and there's a big Twitter element, how do you factor in, you know, if your hourly rate is $100 an hour or $200 an hour, and you know the post is going to take you 2 hours, so you give them a price of $300, but then are you surcharging for like influence on Facebook or Twitter? I mean, I know there's some people out there, I think it's Taylor just said her Facebook page has 200,000 fans like right now. Her engagement is crazy. Do we charge a premium for that sort of influence that we can drive through social media?
Yeah, I think you do. And so, you know, like they want you for the entire package, but more than likely they're going to want that influence on one of those channels too if you have it. So, you know, if you have 1 million Facebook followers or Facebook fans and you have really good interaction there, they'll pay for that. I mean, anybody would pay for that. It's Facebook. Nobody's getting that kind of interaction right now. So I do think you charge up for that. I don't really know that there's a set number. You know, when I host Twitter parties, I just have one flat rate for a Twitter party. I'll negotiate some for that if I know that the company will come back and, you know, do other parties with me. But I know that people are going to charge way less, and if they're going to get the same results, then the company should go with him too. So I don't know what the surcharge would be, but that could be something that could be like an add-on to say, I'll share it on these social channels. For Twitter, it will be X. For Twitter and Facebook, it would be Y, and they can understand that the big difference for why the additional cost is because Facebook and all of your interaction there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then how would you, so if you have a brand come to you and say, it's basically a longer campaign, so we want 6 posts from you over the next 6 months or over a year. Not necessarily a brand ambassadorship, because that's something different, but you know, it's a sponsored campaign for chicken, and you know, we're going to talk about spring chicken recipes and summer and you know, whatever, or we're going to talk about, you know, thrifty, how to make cheap chicken meals, whatever. But there's more than one post involved, so it would be more of a series.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an up your price or a package deal lower your price a little bit per post?
That would be a package deal. So if I know that I'm getting that set number of posts, I would offer a package deal. But what do you do?
I think it's a lower your price.
Yeah.
Not lower, but you know, be a little more flexible. Only because it's guaranteed income, and usually with sponsored campaigns, and we'll talk about this in a second, you're sort of waiting for them to catch you, right? You're the fish and you want to see the hook. And it's not something that necessarily people are going out and advocating for themselves. And so if you know that you're going to have this, you know, price every month coming in, or this post every 2 months, and that's guaranteed for the next 6 months or a year, then I would be willing to negotiate a little bit on that to guarantee the income.
Yeah.
Now, if it gets into something like brand ambassadorship, where you're maybe doing interviews or something media, then of course the price is going to go way up. But that's a totally different topic. And then, sort of moving on to the whole, you know, how do you get these campaigns? Because I hear that a lot. You know, how do you get picked? How do you get brands to notice you? I think it's really hard. I think we all have stories of, you know, we were tweeting about something and we loved it, or we wrote a post, and I guess maybe we don't all, but a lot of us have stories about brands finding us because of content that we've put on our site organically. So we weren't paid, we loved a product. I mean, right now, Andrea, you're working with a company, not on a sponsored campaign, but you're doing some consulting for a company based on, you know, tweeting at this company about their product, which I don't think you did initially to get a job. So how effective is something like reaching out via Twitter?
Highly effective, considering I'm working on a project that I'm kind of like, it just fell into my lap. But I don't think people really give Twitter enough credit for the potential it has for true networking. I think when I initially joined Twitter back in 2009, it was all about relationships, all about networking. I mean, we met on there. Several other people I've met on Twitter directly, and it was truly about relationships. Now I think Twitter has changed a lot for a lot of bloggers, in that some bloggers and niches I've seen, they just use Twitter as an auto feed. It's just an RSS feed of their content. Now, I'll admit that I do that too. I have an RSS going there, but I also interact with people, you know, scheduled throughout the day, or if I see people tweeting me. But I use it a lot to reach out to brands, just to say, hey, I love your product. Would love to work with you. Or in this case with 9450, I just reached out and said, hey, do you guys work with bloggers at all? Because I initially was going to reach out to them and see if they did reviews. But because I just kind of dragged my feet, I was like, just forget it. I'm going to buy the ball, because that's kind of where I am nowadays. I'd rather just buy the products myself, and then if I want to do a review on it, it's totally organic, and I can just throw an affiliate link in there. So that's kind of what I did. And you know, when I reached out to him, I said, I have a couple ideas for you. I think he thought I was kind of crazy, like, who are you? I have no idea who you are. But he knew it was coming from an authentic place, because I love their product, and you know, I wanted to share these things with him completely free, willingly, just to help their product succeed. And I think there's been a couple other times I've done that where it's not landed me a consulting job, but it has been like, oh yeah, we'd love to send you a product, we'd like to work with you. And then you have to understand too that PR people are following you. So even if you reach out to a brand, there's probably other PR people that are following you, and they're seeing that you're trying to engage online just to talk to people. Don't make it about, like, I want to reach out to you because I want something. Make it something like, hey, I made this recipe with Reese cups. I had Reese cups tweet out this link to these cupcakes that I have on the site, and tons of people retweeted it. They mentioned my Twitter handle. I had no idea that, I mean, they were even out there, but they found them, and then I, kind of joked back and forth with them about it, and so that was just something that if I wanted to pursue a relationship with Reese Cups, I should have done it before Easter for the Easter eggs, but it was an opportunity for me to kind of take and see, how can I work with them in a more strategic way.
Yeah, that's great. And I think some of us have, not myself, but I think a lot of bloggers have abandoned Twitter because it has become sort of this auto feed. But I think there's still a lot of ability to and potential to grow those relationships through Twitter and reaching out to people. And it's an easy way to get a hold, not an easy way, but not a difficult way to get a hold of a brand because all of them are on Twitter. And so it is a good way to get someone's attention. I think too, writing blog posts, if there's products that you love, write blog posts and write good blog posts. That's the other thing I think is that coming from the brand side, we want people that can write really great content. We do not want people that have a lot of typos and misspellings and blurry pictures or just if your content's great, I'm not saying if your content's great the brands will come flocking to you, but if that's your goal is to get brand awareness, really focus on that content and focus on how you're presenting yourself online. Another big thing that I'm always just shocked when bloggers do this is don't bash any brands online, because even though you might not be bashing Jell-O because you love Jell-O, if you're bashing a different brand, Jell-O is not going to want to work with you because they know that if, all of a sudden Jell-O makes you mad, you might turn on them. I know that's hard because it's sort of that blending of our personal and professional brand, but brands are so concerned about their image and how they're presented on social media, and so it really matters if when they want to work with bloggers, what is this blogger, what are they representing online? What are they willing to do? Are they willing to drop profanity online? Some brands don't care. Some brands like that. That's part of their brand, and that's a positive. Other brands will not work with you at all ever because they don't ever want to be associated with that. So you have to really think about who you want to work with, what their values are, what they stand for, and make sure that your online brand really meshes with that, because a lot of times it could just be that one time you ranted about Delta because you were stuck in, no offense, Kelly Snyder, I know they screwed you over if you're watching this, but one time you ranted about something and maybe to them that's a deal breaker forever and ever, even though you were very, right to do it because you were in an extreme situation. And I know all of us have tweeted at brands probably because we're frustrated or we can't get through. I mean, I tweeted at somebody the other day because I spent 2 hours on hold. But I tried to make the tweet polite, like, hey, I'm trying to get through to you.
Right.
It was clear that I wanted attention, but it wasn't, attacking. And I think that's really important for bloggers to remember that they, even though it's probably a personal Twitter account, it's attached to your brand and it makes a difference.
Right, and I know we've talked about this some too, and that definitely agree. Don't be bashing brands online. You can vent your issues or concerns in a productive, constructive way. But I also think too, you got to be authentic out there. So if you're authentically just a grumpy old bat, then go with that, and you're going to get the campaigns that you get. And I know that's worked for a lot of people. But if you have, you generate positivity online, and then all of a sudden you have these several updates that are negative, it's not going to be the end of the world, but you are a brand and people are watching whether you think it or not. So that's something that I personally had issues with because I'm like, listen, this is me, I'm authentic. You get all of me, and if you don't like it, then hit the road. And I've done that with several people, and I mean, it hasn't hurt me yet. I'm still getting stuff, but I just think that you have to be authentic, but then also just be professional at the end of the day, because that's what you want to stand for. Even professionals get irritated or frustrated, so as long as you're being constructive about it, then that's good.
Right, and I agree. I think authenticity is the key, and I think that brings up another point in that, if you really want to work with Huggies, and you get a campaign with Huggies, do not take a Pampers campaign the next week. I think one of the things about working with brands is that once you get in with them, you tend to either the agency has other relationships with similar brands that would be a great fit for your site. So maybe you work with Kraft, but then the next time you work with Pepperidge Farm, and the next time you work with another food brand, but they're all managed by the same agency. Those aren't actually, but there's a lot of places that are. So be thinking about how you're representing the brand. So if you're doing a diaper campaign, don't promote the competitor the next week. If you're working with, Kraft cheese, don't promote Sargento the next week. You really need to be authentic. And, your readers, it doesn't fit with your readers either. Your readers are like, well, this person will just write about whatever someone pays them to write about. And so it hurts you in general, I think, with the brands and with your readership when, and I don't know what the time limit is on that, if, it's a month or if it's 6 weeks or if it's a year, depending on, depending on the scope of the project. But I think that's important too, is to think about, you're putting this on your site, you're basically giving it a recommendation, you're putting your brand behind it, so you need to make sure it truly is authentic. And it's okay to even, I think, get involved in a project and then back out, as long as you're not taking the money and running. I think if you get involved in a project and you realize that you cannot be authentic about it, it's much better to send a very polite email and say, this just isn't a good fit for me. Can we please cancel the contract, or can I work on something different? Than to put something out there that's phony.
Right.
Well, actually, it's 9:30. Okay, so sorry for all the technical glitches this time. This is what happens when Erin leaves us to ourselves. We don't know how to work the computer. But we will be back next week, hopefully with Erin, so that everything will run smoothly. And we will be talking more about working with brands, content creation, and leveraging your online, offline presence at the Digital CoLab event in June this year in San Diego. We still have a few tickets available, and we would love to see you there. So we will be talking more about this in our Digital CoLab Facebook group, and if you have any questions, we will try to get them in there. And I'm sorry we didn't get to questions, but good grief, we couldn't even get this thing to work, so how could we possibly look for questions? So, we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.